Hello, and welcome to the latest edition of Renegade Investor Report with me, Rowan. In this episode, I think it's a really important episode, and I give you plenty of warning here. I'm going to be on my high horse talking about freedom and liberty, which I believe has been the biggest victim of the global you-know-what. So let's get into it. Who's Renegade Investor Report for? Well, it's certainly for established investors and business owners who want to build and preserve family wealth, and for newer investors who want to learn about this so they can try and avoid some of the mistakes their parents have made. But today's episode is very much focused on the third bullet, which is any of us who are concerned about declining liberty and the role of the state in our daily lives. And as you'll see, it has not been a great year for democracy. The Renegade Investor Report is kindly supported by two organizations, the Beaufort Society, which is a private members club for high net worth investors. You can learn more about them at beaufortsociety.com, and also by Crypto for Grown-ups, which is something I run with sector expert Dee Ludlow to help the over 40s and the over 50s and the over 60s to get into the whole crypto sector, to understand it better and to see if it's the thing that they should be investing in today. There's a lot more you can learn about that at cryptoforgrownups.co.uk. So thanks to them for supporting us. So has freedom been the biggest victim of the last 18 months? This is something very close to my heart for reasons that will become apparent as we go through the broadcast. But I think it is, for me, a rhetorical question. Absolutely. Obviously, I appreciate people have died, families have been bereaved, and that's horrible. I know there's been a huge economic impact, although there's been a massive amount of activity to try and offset the economic impact. But there's been remarkably little focus on the impact that governments and the measures they've taken have had on our personal freedom. And I think, frankly, it's time to recognize this, and it's time to fight back, because if we stay quiet about this, it's only going to get massively worse. Here's a quote from the Economist Intelligence Unit's Democracy Index report. So this is not some kind of radical organization that I've managed to find to quote from here. This is a major, very highly respected organization. Let me quote from their latest report. Across the world in 2020, citizens experienced the biggest rollback of individual freedoms ever undertaken by governments during peacetime, and perhaps even in wartime. And I can vouch for that. I have elderly relatives who were alive during World War II, and they confirm there was never anything like we've seen in the last 18 months. But what about this? The willing surrender of fundamental freedoms by millions of people was perhaps one of the most remarkable occurrences in an extraordinary year. And that's the thing that really riles me so much, that everyone has just sat back and accepted this. And there's been so little protest, although separate issue about the media not covering those protests. In some ways, the BBC's propaganda unit is reminiscent of things we saw in the 1930s. So there's been very selective coverage, shall we say, in the mainstream media of what has been going on. But by and large, most people, certainly here in Britain, have accepted the most incredible restrictions on their freedom with barely a whimper. I've had experience of the government's approach to this firsthand. My heinous crime was going to France when it was kind of only on the amber list. And then whilst I was there, they invented this thing called Amber Plus, which I think had more to do with Johnson-Macron politics than anything to do with science. But when we drove back, it meant we had to do locator forms and we had to be under house arrest, in quarantine for 10 days. So, we fill in a locator form that says when we're going to drive through and emerge from the Eurotunnel. And yet my wife Daphne's phone rings while we're sat in the queue at the French end of Eurotunnel saying, "I'm outside your home in Weybridge and you're not here." And we said, "That's because we're still in France. Have you read our locator form? We ain't due there for another 3 hours." That didn't seem to satisfy him, so he left a really snotty note in our letterbox saying that they could potentially inform the police about us. We were effectively suspected criminals for not having been in our home 3 hours before we said we would be on our locator form. So we then get home that evening, find the snotty letter in our letterbox. The next day is a Saturday, and we'd had a very tiring day, so we were having a lie-in. Knock on the door at 8:30 a.m. on a Saturday. I open the door in my dressing gown. There's a guy in a high-vis jacket filming me on his phone, asking me my name and saying he's here from the check and trace police or whatever they are to check up on me. So I thought this was outrageous. I'm a double jabbed British citizen with a negative PCR test within 24 hours or whatever it is. I must be one of the safest people in the country. And yet here's the government spending taxpayer money having this guy turn up to film me. So I got my own camera out, my own phone, and started filming him, filming me, and telling him how I was going to write to my MP about this, and this was outrageous. And then he starts saying that I'm harassing him, which is obviously part of their toolkit that they said, if they get a bit awkward, just say you're going to accuse them of harassment. Daphne was convinced we'd have the police cars arriving with their blue lights on soon. But I thought, I'm just not going to take this crap. So I said, sorry, mate, but, you're the one harassing me. Eventually, he stormed off. And then we started getting phone calls every single day for 10 days from the government asking us if we were staying put in our home because, we'd had committed this heinous crime of driving from France. And, my question is, at what point does sensible precaution stop and government interference and totalitarianism start? I was being treated like a criminal. They might as well have strapped one of those things on my leg like I was a prisoner on probation. That's the way I was treated as a British citizen who was already double jabbed and had a clear test. So, to me, that was the final straw, and that made me realize just that things have gone too far. And as I now start to analyze the material that I'm going to present to you, I can see that clearly my experience was far from unique. This is the Economist's kind of heat map of the world, if you like, where the more red you are, the more totalitarian, the more authoritarian the regime is. And as you can see clearly, very big emphasis on Asia and Africa. Not really any big surprise there. But what you will be surprised about is some of the regimes which are regarded as flawed democracies, because only the deepest blue is a full democracy. And of course, some of this actually predates, I think, some of the worst measures. So, for example, you see Australia down there as kind of a flawed democracy verging on full democracy, but they've been one of the most vigorous lockdowners of all, and yet it hasn't actually helped them that much. What we're sadly lacking is any kind of objective, independent research into whose approach worked best, because the massive lockdowners have had all sorts of problems, the best vaccinators have had all sorts of problems, and the ones that have been more laissez-faire have had different kinds of problems. So, hopefully some lessons will be learned, but the price we've all paid for most countries' response has been a massive loss of freedom. The Economist maintains an index of 167 countries based on 5 key measures: electoral process and pluralism, by which they mean, are there multiple parties you can vote for? If there's only effectively one candidate who gets 98% of the vote, or in some cases 103% of the vote, it kind of looks a bit suspicious. So, is there an effective political opposition that you can vote for if you don't like the government? Does government function in a sensible and a reasonable way? Are you able to participate in politics, or are you kind of excluded from the process in some kind of military regime? Is there a democratic political culture? That's a slightly softer measure, but I guess you'll know if you're in one, or you probably know if you're not in one. I certainly feel like I used to be in one in the 20th century. I certainly do not feel like I live in a democratic culture in 21st century Britain. And where are civil liberties? Well, the answer is disappearing fast, as you'll see. But these are the criteria by which countries are judged, and the judgment is in, and it is not good. just 8.4% of the world's population now live in what the economists reasonably objectively classes as a full democracy. 8.4%. More than a third are under authoritarian rule, the kind of thing we fought in 2 world wars to avoid. Globally, the average is 5.37 out of 10, and that's the lowest since records began in 2006. And out of the 167 countries that they've surveyed, 116 declined in their democratic standards during 2020. Now, I hope you see this is not just me mouthing off about something because I had a bad personal experience with the government Gestapo. This is really serious, and it's happening everywhere around the world, and we've got to do something about this. Let me just give you another couple of quotes here. Government-imposed lockdowns and other pandemic control measures led to a huge rollback of civil liberties in 2020, causing downgrades across the majority of countries. Confronted by a new deadly disease to which humans had no natural immunity, most people concluded that preventing a catastrophic loss of life justified some temporary loss of freedom. However, the ranking penalized countries that withdrew civil liberties, failed to allow proper scrutiny of emergency powers, or denied freedom of expression, regardless of whether there was public support for government measures. In France, for example, severe lockdowns and national curfews led to a small but significant decrease in its overall score, and the country dropped into the flawed democracy category. Turnout in the American presidential election in November was the highest for 120 years, and the country recorded its best political participation score since the index began. But public trust in the democratic process was dealt a blow by the refusal of Donald Trump and many of his supporters to accept the election result, and the United States remains in the flawed democracy category. This, the country that's fought 20-year wars to try and impose democracy on others, itself is seriously flawed. It's worth going back to the actual Declaration of Independence in America, on which much of the approach to their society was based, which of course says these famous words that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their creator with certain unalienable, i.e. they can't be transferred, rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Notice the purpose of the state is to secure and protect our God-given rights, not to have the ability to grant or withdraw them. This is a fundamental difference in what governments are meant to be doing versus what they believe they can get away with and what they have been allowed to get away with in the last 12 months. They should be protecting our rights, not removing them. And here's another way of looking at this. Is from another think tank, freedomhouse.org in America, showing how the United States view of democracy has been in decline, and it's actually been going down over a 10-year period from 94 to 83. Things like political corruption, conflicts of interest, lack of transparency, punitive immigration and asylum policies. America is no longer this land of the free and home of the brave. Those days, and arguably the American dream that went with them, I think, have perished. And the United States is a very divided country these days. In fact, if you look at democracy as a whole, back to The Economist, you can see that if this was a stock market share price or something, you probably wouldn't be investing any new money at the moment. That's a 14 or 15-year trend line, and it's very much going in the wrong direction. Here's another way of looking at it. This is a snapshot by regions. So as you can see, the bad guys on the left are mainly in Asia, Australasia, Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, Eastern Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. The good guys-ish are in Western Europe, North America, and a few in Asia and Australia, a few in the other territories, but very much a tale of two kinds of climates, really. Western Europe and North America clinging to democracy, Asia, Africa, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe really in bad shape from a democratic perspective. So let's have a look at the rankings. Here's the hit parade. Who's top of the pops in 2020? Well, you've got to go to the cold, frozen north, really. Norway comes in top, Iceland second, Sweden third. So, Scandinavia definitely looks like one of the best places to be if you value democracy. New Zealand and Canada, again, well known for their democratic freedoms, although New Zealand, again, heavily into lockdown during this pandemic. Whether that would affect its score in the future, I don't know. But that's your top five. You're probably thinking, where's Great Britain in this index? The answer is between Uruguay and Chile, which doesn't feel that great a place for me. We're in 16th place with an 8.82 score. We're behind places you might expect like Switzerland, Luxembourg, Germany, ahead of Japan, Spain, but we're not in fantastic company there. I would never have thought of Chile as being the last bastion of democracy, and we just slightly in fact, we've got the same score exactly as Chile. So our overall score is just ahead there, 8.54. So those are in the middle of the table. What about flawed democracies? Well, France, United States, and Portugal, where I'm recording this from, have also come into the flawed democracy category. So this is happening to countries that you know and love. This is not just some basket case banana republics. This is real core Western European civilized countries being classed by an organization like The Economist as flawed democracies. Does that get your attention? Shouldn't it get your attention? And let's have a look, of course, at the prime suspects in the bottom five. No surprise to see the Rocket Man at number 167 with a massive score of 1.08. Let's all pile into North Korea to enjoy life there. You could always try the Democratic Republic of Congo, Central Africa, Syria, Chad. These are the countries where, life is pretty hellish for people. And, this, don't forget, this is the direction we are now heading in. I can't make it any clearer than all these independent think tanks and respected organizations telling us directionally we are heading towards Congo and North Korea if we don't do something about it. That's the point I really want to get across to you. It's not just me having a rant. It is by any factual and scientific or pseudo-scientific process that these guys go through. It's clear the direction we're heading in. So here's the democracy index by regime type. Out of 167 countries, 23 are full democracies, 52 are flawed democracies, 35 are a kind of a hybrid between democracy and authoritarianism, which I think personally is where we are in the UK now. And then the full authoritarian regimes, 57. The highest single number by those four categories is the authoritarian regimes. The lowest single number are full democracies, 8.4%. So, you've got 50% or just over half living in either a hybrid or authoritarian. You've got almost half, 41% living in a flawed democracy, and a mere 8.4% in a full democracy. Those statistics are shameful. Politicians should be hanging their heads at this point. But of course they're not. They are grinning, they are laughing into their hands because they can't they just don't believe what they've got away with in the last 18 months. It's changed the way they think about politics forever, to our massive cost as citizens. Here's another one from freedomhouse.org. They call this the democracy gap, which is to say the number of countries that have improved in democracy minus the number of countries that have declined. And guess what? The reds massively outweigh the blues, and that's true all the way back to 2005. So this is a trend that's been running for 15, 16 years now. And we've let it run. We've done nothing about it. And we are getting the democracy that we deserve. That's the honest truth. Here's another chart that doesn't make great reading. The number of free countries, according to Freedom House, declining in the green there. The partly free, kind of static around the high 50s, the not free increasing every bit as much as the free is declining. So, again, different organizations, different measurement approaches, different categorizations, but the same underlying message. Freedom is in retreat. Democracy is dying. Their latest report says democracy's defenders sustained heavy new losses in their struggle against authoritarian foes, shifting the international balance in favor of tyranny. These withering blows mark the 15th consecutive year of decline in global freedom. The countries experiencing deterioration outnumbered those with improvements by the largest margin recorded since the negative trend began in 2006. The long democratic recession is deepening. Here's a powerful quote from Freedom Force International. One of the things that concerns me is how much I see young people wanting government and the state to do more and more and more for them, whether that's jobs, benefits, whatever. There's a real kind of entitlement culture developing, but there's something they seem to miss in all this. And I think this quote from Freedom Force International really captures the essence of it. If the state is powerful enough to give us everything we want, it also will be powerful enough to take from us everything we have. And if you've seen some of the things going around in the global financial elites talking about us owning nothing and renting everything in the future, you can see that this could happen. And if you look at the social credit score system in China, if you do something the government doesn't like, they can withdraw your travel rights. They can withdraw your passport. They can take money out your bank account. This is what happens when you give the state too much power. They will use it and abuse it, and you will be the victim. So be careful what you wish for, because if the state gives you more and more, they can and potentially will take it away. And of course, what we see in these more totalitarian systems is that they have this great leader who claims to represent the best interests of the people. Have a look at my episode on China if you want to see what their great leader is, how he's being positioned to 10-year-olds now. In reality, they're just dictators, and again, I think it's ironic. And as I said last time, it does make me reach for my copy of George Orwell's Animal Farm. The two big workers' revolutions of the 20th century have delivered two of the biggest totalitarian dictatorships in the 21st century. So I can't imagine that's quite how people planned it. But, it's, the Freedom Force guys refer to these politicians as pirates. And of course, some people have been objecting, some people have been protesting, but they have a whole series of ways in which they deal with this. The first is just to ignore it. Today's story on social media disappears tomorrow. If you ignore it, it'll go away, or just deny it. Then you can start actively using the media, mainstream media, and so on, to discredit the leadership of opposition campaigns. We've seen that time and time again. You can maybe buy them off if that's possible. Just lobbying groups and so on can often get funds to buy off opposition groups, or you can just start playing rough, as has been the playbook in Hong Kong, where you can be arrested for holding up a blank sheet of A4 paper. So they know how to deal with dissent. And as I say, I was particularly aggrieved at the behaviour and the performance of the BBC during the last 18 months, where I would find on social media somewhere that there'd been massive protests, even riots, against the measures that were being taken, and they were either not reported at all, or they were only reported in the context of, these horrible people. There were 27 arrests made because these horrible people did something naughty in Parliament Square or whatever. There was no kind of, here's a balanced view of the other argument. These people are against this banana medicine, whatever it was. None of that went out the window. They just became a propaganda mouthpiece for 10 Downing Street, and they'll forever have fallen in my estimation because of that. So the head of Freedom Force International, a very interesting guy called G. Edward Griffin. You can see a couple of his videos on their website there. And he's kind of analyzed how we can respond to what he calls the pirates if we want to do something about this. And he doesn't pull any punches. And you may feel this is too radical, but I think it does encapsulate what most people do and how most people have reacted. First is they do nothing. They get on with their lives. They focus on having the next iPhone or the next holiday, and it's someone else's problem. They just ignore it, and it just all passes over them, and their freedoms just get gradually dismantled, and they don't even know it's happening. And scarily, that is what the mediocre majority will do. And it's worrying and frightening, but hey, that's the way of the world. Some will actually say, hey, hold on a minute, there's opportunities here. I could join the pirates and I could get on board and have a great career in politics. I could ride with them. I could get all the bungs that are going. I can get all the specialist positions and all the advisory roles and all the income. I could do really well out of this by becoming a pirate myself. And quite a few have done that. It's been a great career path. We have all these professional politicians these days. There was a time when politicians used to have a career in the professions or in trade, make some money, and then decide to give back to society by going into politics. That all changed in the late 20th century when we got the Tony Blairs of this world, the professional politicians who got to the top young, and then they left office young, and they made a fortune as a consultant or a Middle East peace envoy in his case. That's got to be the biggest laugh of the last 100 years, making Blair a Middle East peace envoy. Anyway, I don't want to get distracted here, but lots of people have had a very lucrative career on the gravy train of decreasing democracy and increasing state power. The other option is to just try and get out, to try and jump ship and try and go off grid and go somewhere else. And certainly a lot of what I would call smart money people have decided, and I've been pushing this for years now, to have a plan B, to have somewhere else to go, another country, another citizenship, another residency program, if things get too bad in your home country. And things are getting bad in some of the places you might not expect them to get so bad. So what's your plan B? Have you even given this the slightest thought? Maybe now's the time you should. Some people try to hide, they try to go off grid. I think that is almost impossible these days. Your mobile phone is a tracking device. There's all sorts of things in there you don't know about that are keeping track of you. Everything you do online and on the phone is being recorded and shared with the government by the big tech companies upon request. So, it's almost impossible now. I think you'd have to literally live in the jungle and kill your food each day. It'd be very, very hard to live without any kind of digital footprint, without any kind of electronic presence that could be traced by the government. So good luck with that plan. What we can do, and what I've certainly done, is write protest letters. I often write to my MP. It is kind of part of the democratic process, but I've noticed again, even that's changed in recent years. The way in which I now get, I've got layers of gatekeepers to get through. I get, total bog standard government written responses. Very few MPs are willing to go into bat for their constituents against the government. If they've got ambitions themselves, they don't want to upset their cabinet colleagues, and really it's become less and less effective. I think writing to your MP, the process has got easier, the outcome has been less effective. Petitions, you can get, again, this is kind of pseudo democracy where if you get a certain number of signatures on a petition, they'll have to look at it. You might get a question in the House, but you're not going to change the world with that, to be fair. And they know that, and they devise a process that gives you the appearance of democracy, the appearance of listening, the appearance of action, but it doesn't change their basic agenda one jot. Take them to court. This is certainly what has been tried. One of the organizations I'll tell you about in a minute put hundreds of thousands of pounds into legal action against the British government for lockdown. Needless to say, the judiciary backed the government. We still have a sliver of independence in our judiciary, probably more so than, say, in America. But that was unsuccessful. But it is still one of those last vestiges of democracy, is you can get judicial reviews. You can go to court if you have very deep pockets. You're looking at a starting price of £100,000, very quickly rack up $500,000. It depends whether you really want to go that far. And of course, they know that. They have bottomless pits of money. It's taxpayers' funny money, so they will spend any amount to beat you in court, and the system is very much skewed in their favor. So Edward G. Griffin reckons the only really effective action is to organize a counter coup and recapture the ship from the pirates. And I'm starting to think he might be right. I think we certainly need a lot more of items 5 and 6. But if none of that works, I think we have to be ready, or we have to appear to be ready to go further in terms of item 7, if we are going to make some serious changes to turn around this juggernaut that has 15 years of taking away our democratic rights and is not by any means finished yet. We can learn a lot from Lenin, you see. His 3 principles of power were, firstly, it makes no difference what you think if others hold the power. In other words, you can have all the academic debates you like, you can write all the letters you like, but if others are holding the power, it's not going to make any difference. And as we've seen, I think this is fairly self-evident, power does not seek out those who are virtuous. It seeks out those who are ambitious and can get themselves into positions of power, which of course then brings us to his 3rd point, is that once they achieve power, power itself must be used to defend the powerful from those who would take it from us. And that is very much the playbook of politicians across the world. Their only 2 things they want are to get power and to keep power. And once they have that, they will manipulate everything to their own ends and gradually dismantle any kind of structure, mechanism, or group or people who could challenge that power. And again, Freedom Force International's conclusion, and in fact, this is their motto in Latin, is that those without power cannot defend freedom. That bears reflecting on. Those without power cannot defend freedom, which means if we are to defend freedom, we have to get ourselves into positions of power. We can't be armchair activists. We can't just say, oh, it's someone else's problem. Oh, that's too difficult. Oh, I can't be asked. That would be work. That would mean turning out for a demo. That would mean getting elected as a councillor or a school governor or even an MP or a mayor. All these kind of various circles of power where you could actually make a difference. If you don't have power, you cannot defend freedom from those who have the power and are going to use that power to beat you. It's almost an us and them situation, I think, between those that kind of gravitate into some of these kind of pirate power positions and those of us with a more freedom-loving, libertarian, entrepreneurial bent. I tried to summarize it on this slide. They tend to be collectivists. They want to, and that covers everything from socialism to communism to any other ism you like. And then by nature, they tend to gravitate into government. That's where the power is. That's where the collectivists are. And they want and aspire to and put all their energy into creating and growing a big government and a deep state, because that's how they thrive. What do? They pass laws. Could these people ever do anything more constructive than just sit there passing laws? I'd love to have a scenario where any country could only have 100 laws. And if you want to do 101st one, you have to decide which of the other 100 gets taken off the statute book. I mean, now, the legal code in this country and some of the other, developed democracies is just unrecognizable. It's just so big that no one can fully understand it. Of course, if law doesn't work, then they control the army and the police, so they use coercion. They've got that military and legal power, and their view of the world is that we are there to serve them, the state. And pretty much the mirror image of that, we tend to be more individualists. We're focused on business and entrepreneurship, where we don't have to have a boss. We try to avoid being financially dependent on the state. You think they'd thank us for that, but they don't exactly roll out the red carpet. We want small government that looks after things like defense of the realm, perhaps climate change, the stuff that you can't really do individually, and then leaves us to get on with things. We like free, unmanipulated markets. Though it's a long time since we had them. If you look at all the funny money that's been created and the central banks buying bonds and things, these are such manipulated markets. It's hard to know what to invest in. We want independence, whether that's political or financial or just lifestyle independence. We just want freedom, just want to live our lives. And of course, the one thing we do have is some economic power, particularly, if we've achieved some success in some of the other points on that list, we tend to have some economic power, which can give us at least some lobbying clout with the collectivists who are in office. And we have this naive belief that the state is there to serve us. That's kind of what the American Declaration of Independence said. And although we don't have something similar to that in the UK, I think most people would imagine that we elected politicians to serve us, not so that they can be our masters. So most of us, of course, don't focus on issues like, is democracy in decline today? All I'm thinking about is how to survive and get ahead. Probably, if you're a couple that you're both working to make ends meet, to pay for the kids' education or whatever, you're trying to get that promotion or that new job that might improve your circumstances. You've got a lot of pressure at work. So if you're not actually working, all you want to do is have fun. You just want entertainment. You want leisure. You want Netflix. You want YouTube. You want computer games. You want foreign holidays. Those are the things that, fill your leisure time. As far as you're concerned, politics, it's like pensions. It's boring. Leave it to them. Leave it to the others. We sort of probably think we want freedom, but if you ask the man in the street to define what he meant by freedom, I'm not sure they would be able to. And yet, if you'd asked my father or my grandparents or great-grandparents why they went to war and were prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice, I bet they'd have said something like, to protect my family and to defend our freedom and our way of life. That's why millions of people died, and that blood bought our freedom. And that's why I get so annoyed when we give these freedoms away so cheaply and so easily to the pirates. They don't even know they're in a battle, and they don't have a vision of what victory would look like. And their ignorance and apathy are the best friends of these pirate politicians, because the more we let them get away with it, the more they will do. And boy, in the last 18 months, have we let them get away with it big time. So what can I do, you ask? Obviously, it's a bit like climate change, I suppose. You feel powerless in these big issues, and yet the reality is each of us does need to change at a micro level in order to make the macro difference. As I've said briefly before, you need to become an activist. You need to, get involved in some way. It starts with a letter to your MP. It starts with turning out at that protest when you think they've gone too far. It starts with signing petitions, but it can go on a lot further than that. I want to show you some other organizations that you could join that would help. And having other people around you who share those concerns obviously is massively supportive and helpful as well. Try and push back. One small example, when I was getting those 10 phone calls every day for 10 days from the government, I started saying to them, look, I know you don't work for the NHS. I know you're a subcontractor to Serco, who've been given vast amounts of taxpayer cash to run this system. I know you're in India. Where is my data going from this conversation? I don't feel comfortable giving you my data, even confirming my year of birth. Once I did that once, the phone calls stopped. Now, whether that means I'm on some blacklist database somewhere and that, the Gestapo are going to come and get me any minute now. Oh, there's a knock at the door. No, I'm joking. I don't know. But by pushing back even that little bit, they got the message that I was an awkward cuss and maybe it wasn't worth ringing me anymore. So it starts with the baby steps. It starts with the small things. We need them to know we're just not going to take this treatment anymore. But also, if it doesn't work, you need a plan B. Where else would you go if you really felt the country was just going downhill so far, it was irretrievable? Now's the time to start researching your options, because frankly, there are not that many. I know there's experts out there who say they can help you get this passport or that nationality or whatever. When you boil it down, there are not that many that are viable solutions for most people with families. And also do encourage the people your circle of influence, friends, families, neighbors, work colleagues. Talk to them about it. See what they think. See if they want to get involved. So let me finish by just showing you a few organizations that are trying to stem the tide and who desperately need our support. First one I'll mention is Liberty, formerly the National Council of Civil Liberties. Their website is libertyhumanrights.org.uk. I'm very close to Liberty because it all started as a result of the Jarrow March in the 1930s. I am originally from Northeast England. My great uncle Sammy was a mayor of Jarrow and was one of the organizers of the Jarrow March. When they got to London, peaceful protest, they marched all that way looking for jobs, not even for government handouts. And then some agents provocateurs started deliberately causing trouble to make them look bad. That was seen by some lawyers in the crowd, and they were so incensed by that, they started Liberty. And it's been going for the best part of a century now, trying to protect our rights from all kinds of internal attacks, including the latest Rights and Freedoms Act, which is a typical piece of, political doublespeak on this new bill. And they're saying that according to Civicus, which is an organization that monitors the openness of civil society, that the bill, the police bill, giving them further powers to crack down on protests. They already have massive powers to crack down on protests, but Priti Patel wants to give them even more. She's a very dangerous woman. They're saying this new act poses a serious and unprecedented threat to civic freedoms. Even the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Human Rights said the proposals are oppressive and wrong. In court, in Parliament, and on the streets, this government is dismantling the tools we use to hold it to account, to protect our rights and stand up to power. People are waking up to this agenda and, as we've seen from the growth in Liberty's support, are coming together to resist this power grab. So there's a very well-respected human rights organization confirming everything I've said. It's really happening today, now. A so-called conservative government is really trying to pass some draconian laws which will make protest almost as impossible here as China has done in Hong Kong. Keep Britain Free. I said that there was some organizations fighting back. This was founded by one of my Money and Me guests, Simon Dolan, the Monaco-based UK entrepreneur. And he wanted to take legal action against lockdown. In the end, he got so many messages of support that he opened it up to crowdfunding. And they went through a whole series of campaigns in court. And they had some success in getting things like minutes of the government committees released, and just basically highlighting situations where people's freedoms are being denied them. So keepbritainfree.com, free to join, lots of useful information on how you can get involved with them. In America, freedomhouse.org. I've shown some of their material today. Again, very useful, and again, just to support them and keep up to date with what they're doing. And the more, I suppose, aggressive, if you like, freedomforceinternational.org, they are the ones that really think it's now time to push back. And they really want to organize people around the world to really, say, look, we've had enough of this. It's time that we really, start arguing strongly and fighting more for our freedom. That may appeal to you if you feel as strongly as I do. So in conclusion, my position is we are now the frogs in that pan of water. The temperature, the gas is being turned up, the water is getting hotter. We can either try to climb out now or be boiled alive as democracy simply disappears. I would think probably in the next 10, 15 years. That's how, this is as urgent to me as climate change. We are that close to crossing a Rubicon where democracy becomes a historic artifact that your children and grandchildren will be perhaps able to read about in those history books that have not been censored. And I think, just as I argue from an investment point of view that your wealth is being eroded by currency debasement and inflation, your freedoms are being deliberately, systematically eroded and dismantled by these politicians who we are not doing anything like enough to resist. And I love the old John Stuart Mill quote, "Bad men need nothing more to compass their ends than that good men should look on and do nothing." And nothing is precisely what most of us have done for far too long. Obviously, I'm the renegade investor. I'm all about wealth creation and wealth protection. But what good is all the money in the world if we're not free to enjoy living life the way we want to? This is so fundamental. The time for action is certainly now. I hope you'll take on board what I've said. I hope you'll get involved with those groups, and let's together start to make our own little bit of difference and start pushing back against the decline in democracy that has been accelerating so far and so fast in the last 15 years. Thanks very much for watching.